They stood there for a moment, staring at the creature, the two young boys fascinated by the macabre sight before them. A simple household cat that roamed the streets of the village lay gutted and bleeding before them. Perhaps it was their young age, but neither David nor Timothy thought it odd that the corpse had not drawn the typical scavengers or even flies that it should have. The two twin brothers instead considered the body where it lay at the outskirts of their farmhouse property, trying to place what sort of creature would have killed without consuming the corpse. David, the bolder of the two, brushed his scraggly blonde hair from his face before picking up a stick from the nearby ground to poke at the cat. Timothy, typically more shy and demure in nature, was about to protest, his mouth opening for a moment before he hesitated and shut it, his own curiosity silently egging his twin on. As David poked the corpse, it squished inward, the sensation sickeningly familiar to a pillow. Turning to smile at his brother, David pulled the stick away with a toothy grin. Timothy smiled back, the satisfaction of their sated curiosity infectious. "Davy! Tim!" a woman called from the porch of their homestead. "It's time for dinner!" Excited at the prospect of a hot meal, the pair dropped the stick and sprinted off towards home where their mother was waiting for them. Rushing inside, they took their seats at the rickety wooden table, grinning from ear to ear as their mother wiped their hands on an apron and cloth before settling 2 bowls of stew before them. A poor man's meal, as they were in fact struggling on the outskirts of Belfall. The two young boys pulling their weight for their single mother as they all tended to this small farmstead plot, they kind of held on with this desperation. Even as the boys hungrily devoured their meal, their mother watched them with a sad smile. She would go hungry tonight to feed her 2 boys. It had been years since their father had left them, and the 2 were still but infants at the time. Now, at the age of 12, these 2 had grown up, only ever knowing her and making up for their father's inadequacy by supporting their mother around the farm. As their mother cleaned up after the meal, the 2 young boys found themselves drawn back outside. Now, as the sun was setting, the 2 had become focused on their own duty, rather than curiosity. Enough games. They had chickens and other livestock to tend to before the end of the night. If they left the cat's body where it lay, it would attract coyotes, or worse, to their little slice of life. And so, armed with their stick, against the slowly fading light, David and Timothy made their way back towards the corpse of the cat that they had found. As they made their way through the garden path, shutting the gate behind them, they shushed the chickens back to their coop and shut the gate for the night. Turning their attention to the cat once again, they eventually found the spot where it lay. The corpse, gutted before, was not there. A blood spatter trail was the only indication of its existence. Matted grass led off towards the edge of the woods where the trail left off. The 2 boys looked at each other, the discomfort each felt hanging in the air like a thick cloud of sulfur. Something must have gotten to the body already. Slowly, nodding to each other, David took the lead, trailing his frightened brother behind him as they followed the trail to the edge of their property. Here and there, the long grass was spattered with blood and bits of gore or bone. This trail, while grotesque, was clear enough for the boys to follow, even as the sun was setting. David, his eyes wide open in fear as he searched for any sign of the dead cat or the thing that had snatched it. It was then that he spotted it, the gray-furred cat spattered with gore, laying beside the fence post that he and his brother had set up the year before. With a sigh, David and Timothy stood over the cat, no longer with morbid curiosity, but a sadness and resolve that the creature had finally passed, knowing what it would mean to leave the corpse there. David, with a sigh, reached down to gently grip the body and tossed it over the fence. As he did, however, a terrifying wail startled him as the cat yowled and flailed, biting down on his hand with a strong grip. David yowled as well, recoiling from the bite, but as the cat held firm, its jaw was clamped down tight on the boy's hand before it could let go mid-air. Timothy screamed, surprised and scared at the sight before him, as the cat flew through the air a few feet before squishing wetly against the ground a few feet away. David, gripping his injured hand and crying, searched for the cat quickly, before it could come back for him, as blood dripped down his wrists. The cat, finding its feet, leapt to the top of the fence, its back arched as it hissed at them with a bubbling, gurgling sound. David was shocked. Timothy, screaming, began to cry at the sight of the cat on the fence. The cat, back arched in anger and discomfort with its hackles raised against the boys, had its guts trailing down the fence post it stood on. Blood covered the creature, and it gurgled and spit where it stood, even as its entrails spilled forth. Its eyes clouded white and unfocused. David, still holding his stick, lashed out at the creature, hitting it and the fence and yelling to scare it. The cat, if he could even call it that anymore, leapt from the fence post, its intestines catching as it leapt, tearing free of the body, remaining there on the post like some sort of sinister holiday garland. The creature itself, landing on the other side of the fence, turned back to the two boys, hissing at them before limping off as quickly as it could and scrambling into a hollow beneath a large, long-dead oak tree living near the edge of their property. A smear of blood across the pale bark of that tree was left as the cat disappeared into the shadow beneath. Timothy grabbed his injured brother's hand and practically dragged him back home as they both cried. Rushing to their mother for help, they told her what they had seen as she bandaged David's hand. Concerned, but thinking her voice simply had an overactive imagination, she put them to bed in their room, promising to investigate further in the morning. These boys must have disturbed a cat as it fed on its kill, a mouse or a rabbit, and shame that David was bit, but with proper tending he would recover. The whole matter would end and they would get back to their day-to-day subsistence. Laying in their beds at night, the two stared at the ceiling, avoiding looking out the window at the ominous maple where the cat lay in wait, or the fence post decorated now with the creature's insides. Terrified, the two fought off sleep for as long as possible, but ultimately, one after the other, they both succumbed to their own exhaustion, their troubles bleeding over into nightmares that plagued their sleep. The moon was high when Timothy awoke, the night still holding fast before the dawn. Blinking, he took in the room around him. The light through the window, the soft bedding and blankets of his meager bed, and his brother standing by his bedside. "Davy?" he asked sleepily, before his brother lunged for him. Timothy felt teeth as his brother bit down on his throat, tearing deep into his carotid as hot blood poured forth. David, eyes pale and clouded like the cat before him, pulled backwards with a mouthful of his brother's throat before the poor boy could even scream, chewing for a second before swallowing and diving back in for another bite, slowly but surely excavating his brother's throat. As blood slowly covered the two boys, soaking into the sheets, David, who was no longer David, just as the cat was no longer a cat, fed in the silence of an otherwise peaceful night until something compelled him to stop. Turning his sightless eyes to the window, not David saw the cat, torn and bloodied, sitting peacefully by the windowsill, staring back at him with the same clouded eyes. Not David wiped gristle from his chin, turning to his now limp brother's corpse. Taking him by the hand, he began to walk, dragging this corpse from the bed with a heavy thud as he moved towards the window where the cat waited for him. The cat leapt from the sill on the outside and began walking off into the night. Not David stood there for a second, watching the cat, head cocked in curiosity, before he began bashing his head against the glass of the window. In two slams, the glass broke, sending shards deep into the boy's face. Stepping up onto his bed, not David dragged his brother up and pushed the corpse out the window before climbing out himself. Not noticing the sound of his mother rushing to their room or the lighter for candle. Quickly, David rushed after the cat, dragging the body with almost supernatural speed over the grass and stone as they rushed to the tree where the cat sat before a dark hollow at its base, the telltale blood smear marking it as the cat's hiding place from earlier that day. Turning with an impatient flick of its tail, the cat disappeared into the hollow. Cocking his head, not David clucked his tongue once, twice, and then took a casual bite of his brother's forearm with a wet squish before jamming the body down into the hollow. Stuffing this corpse in was a difficult task, but as he paused for a moment, the corpse was seemingly grabbed and ripped forward through the hollow beneath the tree, pulled from his grip as it crossed the threshold. Not David paused for a moment before crawling into the hollow himself, head first, disappearing into the inky blackness, leaving behind only a bloody handprint on the pale bark of the tree as he went.